The notification hit my screen at 11:42 p.m. on a Tuesday. You have been removed from Hayes family holiday. No warning. Just a digital deletion. Seconds later, a text from my mother arrived to seal the deal. She wrote, "Caleb's in-laws need the master suite this year. We assumed you'd understand. Maybe next year." I sat in the silence of my apartment, the blue light washing over my face. Tears are a biological response to loss, but I hadn't lost anything yet. I had just been given new intelligence. In that moment, the daughter who begged for scraps of love finally died, and the intelligence officer who knows exactly how to dismantle a threat woke up. Drop a comment and let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. I'd love to know who's part of our community. Most people would have dialed their mother immediately. They would have screamed, cried, demanded an explanation for why they were being exiled from their own family holiday. They would have tried to negotiate their value, listing off all the reasons they deserved a seat at the table, but I wasn't most people. I was a senior intelligence analyst for cyber warfare, and in my world, when you detect a breach, you do not make noise. You go silent. You watch. The glass surface of my desk felt cool under my forearms as I opened my laptop. The screen came to life, a stark white contrast to the dark room. My contacts list remained closed. Priority 1 was surveillance. I pulled up the remote administrative panel for the security system at the lake house. I had installed the entire network myself 3 years ago, wiring the cameras, the smart locks, and the thermostat because my father was too cheap to pay a professional and too proud to admit he didn't know how to do it. He thought I did it to be a helpful daughter. I did it because I learned a long time ago that in this family, access was the only currency that mattered. Entering my credentials brought the feed up in high definition. It was snowing in Minnesota. The lake house looked like a postcard, glowing with warm yellow light against the blue-black winter sky. But my eyes went straight to the driveway. My mother had said they needed space for Caleb's fiancé's parents. 2 people, maybe 1 car. 5 vehicles were jammed into the circular drive. 2 Range Rovers, a Porsche Cayenne, and 2 rental sedans with airport tags. None of these belonged to Caleb. And unless his fiancé's parents were traveling with a motorcade, my mother had lied. I didn't feel hurt. I felt a cold click of satisfaction. A lie isn't a betrayal, it's a data point. It means there is a hidden variable I haven't identified yet. A quick keystroke brought up the smart lock history. My father thought the app on his phone controlled the door, but he was just a user. I was the admin. Scrolling through the access logs for the past month, the pattern was unmistakable. Unique entry codes were being generated every 3 or 4 days. Code created. Code used. Code expired. New code created. This wasn't family visiting. This was high-volume traffic. My finger hovered over the call button on my phone. The urge to confront them was visceral. I wanted to hear them stutter. I wanted to catch them in the lie right now. But I pulled my hand back. In intelligence training, they teach you about asymmetric warfare. When you are fighting an enemy who has emotional leverage over you like a family who knows exactly which buttons to push, you cannot win a direct confrontation. If I called now, they would gaslight me. They would say I was being paranoid, that I was spying on them, that I was ruining Christmas with my jealousy. They would make me the villain, and I would end up apologizing just to keep the peace. No, interrupting them was not an option. There is a fundamental rule in strategy. Never interrupt your enemy when he is making a mistake. And my family was making a massive one. I closed the camera feed and opened a new spreadsheet. I named it Operation Eviction. If they wanted to treat me like an outsider, I would stop acting like a daughter and start acting like an auditor. I wasn't going to beg for a room. I was going to build a dossier. I leaned back in my chair, watching the snow fall on the screen. Hundreds of miles away. They thought they had locked me out. They had no idea I was the only one with the master key. With the camera feed minimized, the banking archives took center stage. In my line of work, we are trained to look for patterns, to find the hidden rhythm in the noise, but in my family, I had spent a decade willfully ignoring the most obvious pattern of all. I filtered the search results by recipient. Robert Hayes, Lake House Utilities, Caleb Hayes Tuition. The list populated instantly, scrolling down the screen like a receipt for a life I had purchased but was never allowed to live. The total at the bottom of the column was staggering. It was enough to buy a house outright in most states. But it wasn't the number that made my stomach turn. It was the dates. One transfer from 4 years ago stood out. $5,000. I remembered exactly where I was when I authorized that wire. I was in a temporary operating base outside of Kandahar. The heat was 110 degrees, the air thick with dust that tasted like copper and burnt trash. I was wearing 20 pounds of Kevlar, exhausted from a 30-hour shift monitoring insurgent chatter. My father had called me on the satellite phone, frantic. He wasn't asking if I was safe. He wasn't asking about the mortar fire in the background. He was panicked because the roof at the lake house had a leak, and he didn't have the liquidity to fix it. "It's ruining the hardwood, Jordy," he had said, his voice tight with the stress of a man who refused to get a real job. "If we don't fix it, the appraisal value drops. We lose the asset." The funds were wired before my boots were even off. He didn't say thank you. He just asked for the confirmation number. That was the deal. That was the unspoken contract. I was the silent partner, the invisible investor. I paid for the boat my brother Caleb crashed the summer he dropped out of college. I paid for the expansive cedar deck where my mother drank her expensive Chardonnay and complained to her friends about how cold and distant her daughter had become. I financed the stage for their performance of a perfect upper-middle-class life, while I played the role of the stagehand essential, but strictly prohibited from stepping into the spotlight. Scanning to the top of the list, the last transfer was dated exactly 6 months ago. That was the moment everything clicked. 6 months ago, I had stopped sending the just because checks. I had stopped bailing out Dad's temporary cash flow issues. I had started diverting my paycheck into a high-yield savings account for my own wedding, a wedding I hadn't even told them about yet, because I knew they would find a way to make it about them. I stared at the gap in the payments. 6 months of silence, 6 months of me failing to be their ATM. In a healthy family, love is a bond that survives hard times. But I finally understood that I didn't come from a healthy family. I came from a transactional system. To them, I wasn't a person. I was an appliance. I was a toaster. And when a toaster stops making toast, you don't keep it on the counter. You don't make space for it at Christmas. This is what psychologists call the discard phase. When the narcissist realizes the source of supply has dried up, they don't try to fix the relationship. They simply remove the object that is no longer serving its function. My mother's text wasn't an emotional reaction. It was a business decision. I had stopped paying my subscription fees to the Hayes family, so my membership had been revoked. They didn't hate me. That would imply they had actual feelings for me. It was much simpler than that. They had just found a new revenue stream. And looking at those cars in the driveway, I had a sinking feeling I knew exactly what or who they were selling now. If they weren't getting the money from me, they were getting it from somewhere else. And looking at the convoy of luxury SUVs in the driveway, I knew it wasn't a lemonade stand. A new browser window was all it took to confirm the suspicion. I typed in the address of the lake house, followed by the keywords vacation rental. The result popped up instantly on the first page of search results. It wasn't just a listing. It was a featured Superhost property. The title hit me like a physical slap. The Patriots' Lakeside Retreat. Experience a true hero's homecoming. I clicked the link, my hand trembling slightly, not from sadness, but from a rage so cold it burned. The cover photo was the master suite, my suite, the one I had paid to renovate, but it wasn't styled the way I left it. On the wall above the bed, bathed in soft, professional lighting, was a shadow box frame. Inside it was my Purple Heart. Next to it was my official command portrait, the one taken right after I was promoted. On the bedside table, they had placed my folded American flag, the one presented to me at my grandfather's funeral like a decorative coaster. I scrolled down to the description. Sleep in the room of a decorated intelligence officer. Surrounded by authentic memorabilia from the global war on terror, guests will feel the spirit of sacrifice and honor in every corner of this luxury suite. They were charging $850 a night. They hadn't just evicted me, they were scalping my trauma. They were selling my scars as an experience to tourists who wanted to feel patriotic for a weekend without ever putting on a uniform. My father, the man who called my service embarrassing because it wasn't a corporate job, was now monetizing my medals to pay for his scotch. My phone felt heavy in my hand. Mom wasn't the target. Caleb was. And before I hit dial, I tapped the record button. In my line of work, if it isn't recorded, it didn't happen. He answered on the second ring, loud music thumping in the background. Yo, Jordy, didn't think you'd be calling after Mom's text. Look, don't make this weird, okay? I'm looking at the Airbnb listing, Caleb. I said. My voice was flat. No inflection. The Patriots retreat? The music turned down slightly. Oh, yeah, sick, right? Dad came up with the branding. It's absolutely crushing it. We're booked solid through February. You're renting out my room, I stated. And you're using my Purple Heart as a prop, Caleb laughed. A dismissive, airy sound that grated against my eardrum. Relax, sis. It's just passive income. You're not using the room, and let's be real, you haven't sent a check in months. It's just business. Business, I repeated. You're selling access to my personal history. We're honoring you. He shot back, his tone shifting to that defensive arrogance he used whenever he was caught doing something shady. Most families would kill to have a hero to brag about. You should be flattered. Besides, the guests love it. They feel, I don't know, connected to the cause. We're basically doing PR for you. Take it down, I said. Can't, he scoffed. We have contracts. Non-refundable bookings. Dad says if we cancel, we lose our superhost status. Just chill out, Jordan. We'll send you a gift card or something for Christmas. I gotta go. I have guests checking in. The line went dead. I lowered the phone and looked at the recording timer. 1 minute and 42 seconds. That was all I needed. He had admitted it. He had justified it. He had confirmed they viewed my service not as a sacrifice, but as a marketing hook. I saved the file and named it Evidence 1. Any lingering hesitation I had, any tiny, foolish part of me that worried I was being too harsh, evaporated. They weren't family anymore. They were hostiles occupying a strategic position, and I was done negotiating. It was time to call in the heavy artillery. Anger is inefficient. Action is the only metric. I dialed a number I hadn't used in 2 years. Sterling. A deep, gravelly voice answered on the first ring. Mr. Sterling, it's Jordan Hayes. I need to execute a distressed asset acquisition. Tonight. Mr. Sterling was a corporate shark disguised as a polite Southern gentleman. We had met when I consulted on a cybersecurity breach for his firm. He owed me a favor, but more importantly, he loved to kill. Jordan, he said. The warmth in his voice genuine. It's late, but you don't call me for small talk. What's the target? The Hayes Lake House, I said. There was a pause. Your parents' place? Jordan. Foreclosure is messy with family. It's not a foreclosure yet, I corrected him, pulling up a PDF on my second monitor. I'm looking at the refinance agreement my father signed 5 years ago. The one I co-signed as a guarantor. I opened the document. It was a predatory loan from a second-tier lender, the kind with high interest and draconian terms, which Dad had been desperate enough to sign when his third startup imploded. I had signed it blindly back then, desperate to be the good daughter, to save his ego. But I had read it properly 3 days ago. Page 14, Section C, I said into the phone. The balloon maturity clause. I heard the rapid clicking of Sterling's keyboard. He was pulling up the public records. The loan carries a specific covenant regarding commercial use. I explained, my eyes scanning the legal text I had memorized. If the primary residence is used for commercial purposes without prior written consent from the lender, specifically short-term rentals, the lender has the right to accelerate the loan. They can demand the full balance immediately. And I assume, Sterling said, his tone sharpening, that they didn't ask the bank before turning it into a hotel? They didn't, I said. And since they're already in default on the last 3 payments, which I can see, because I'm on the account, the bank is already prepping to sell the debt. They view it as toxic. So, you want me to call the bank and report the violation? Sterling asked. No, I said. I don't want to report them. I want to become them. I leaned closer to the microphone. I have $350,000 in liquid savings. The outstanding balance on the note is $320,000. The bank wants this off their books before the fiscal year ends. I want you to buy the note. Buy the debt. Assign it to my LLC. The line was silent for 5 seconds. Then, a low chuckle rumbled through the speaker. You want to buy your parents' mortgage so you can be the one to foreclose on them? I want to enforce the contract, I said coldly. They violated the terms. They turned my home into a business. So I'm treating it like a business transaction. Can you do it? With that much cash and a distressed lender? Sterling said. I can have the paperwork drafted by morning. We'll own the paper by noon tomorrow. Do it, I said. And Sterling? Draft the acceleration notice. Immediate payment in full, or surrender of the property. Serve it on January 2nd. Understood, he said. Happy New Year, Jordan. I hung up. My heart wasn't racing. My hands weren't shaking. I felt a strange, icy calm. They had spent years telling me I needed to learn the value of $1. They had lectured me on responsibility while I bailed them out. Well, they were about to get a masterclass in finance. I wasn't the daughter anymore. I wasn't the safety net. I was the bank. And the bank is never sentimental. Buying a mortgage note is not like buying groceries. You don't just tap a card and walk away. You have to perform due diligence. You have to audit the asset to ensure you aren't buying a sinkhole. So, while Sterling drafted the acquisition papers, I dove into the forensic accounting. The last 12 months of banking statements for the joint account attached to the house populated the screen. I had access only because my credit score was the one holding up the walls. The math didn't add up. According to Caleb, the Airbnb was booked solid. According to the listing site, they were charging $850 a night. At 80% occupancy, the property should be generating roughly $20,000 a month. The mortgage payment was only $3,200. Even with utilities, cleaning fees, and my father's expensive taste in scotch, there should have been a surplus. A massive one. Yet the mortgage was 90 days past due. Money leaves a trail. Always. It is physics. Energy cannot be created or destroyed, only transferred. So I started tracking the transfers. Accessing the payment processor linked to the Airbnb account took seconds. The revenue was coming in, exactly as projected, but it wasn't staying there. Every Tuesday, like clockwork, the balance was swept clean. Auto transfer initiated. I traced the routing number. It didn't go to the mortgage lender. It didn't go to the utility company. It went to a digital wallet on a third-tier cryptocurrency exchange. I felt a cold smile touch my lips. This was my playground. Tracking fiat currency into the blockchain is difficult for the IRS. For a cyber warfare analyst with administrative clearance tools, it took me less than 5 minutes. I followed the digital breadcrumbs through the blockchain. The wallet wasn't anonymous. The user hadn't even bothered to use a mixer to hide the transaction history. The wallet ID was tagged with a vanity handle. Caleb Alpha. I stared at the screen, the blinking cursor mocking me. My brother wasn't just managing the property. He was embezzling the revenue. He was siphoning the mortgage payments money meant to secure the roof over my parents' heads and dumping it into speculative meme coins and high-risk leverage trading. But here was the kill shot. My father was the primary signer on the bank account. He received the alerts. He saw the transfers. He knew. My father knew Caleb was stealing the money. He knew the mortgage wasn't being paid. He knew my credit score was taking the hit for the default. And he let it happen. He was willing to burn down the house and torch my financial future just to let his golden boy play stockbroker with stolen money. This wasn't just financial irresponsibility anymore. It wasn't just a toxic family dynamic. This was wire fraud. This was money laundering. I sat back in my chair, the hum of the computer fans the only sound in the room. The last thread of guilt I held the tiny voice saying, "But they're your parents," snapped. "You don't negotiate with terrorists, and you don't co-sign for criminals." I picked up the phone and texted Sterling one word: execute. I wasn't just evicting my parents. I was neutralizing a racketeering operation. And come January 2nd, I was going to show them exactly what happens when you steal from the person holding the keys. January 2nd arrived with a wind chill of 20 below zero. The sky was a flat, bruised gray, heavy with unfallen snow. My rental SUV rolled up to the curb of the lake house. I didn't park in the driveway. That was for residents. And as of this morning, the residency status of the occupants was about to change. Backup was mandatory. 2 men in dark parkas stepped out of the black sedan behind me. Private security contractors. Witness protection for property, not people. I walked up the icy path, my boots crunching on the salt. I wore a tailored black coat, not my uniform. I wasn't here to serve. I was here to collect. My father opened the door before I even knocked. He looked disheveled, wearing a bathrobe and holding a half-empty mug of coffee. His face flushed red when he saw me. "Jordan? What the hell is this?" he snapped, gesturing to the security team. "We told you not to come. We have guests." I didn't answer. I walked past him, stepping into the foyer. The heat hit me, smelling of pine needles and expensive cologne, the scent of money they didn't have. "I'm not here for Christmas, Robert," I said, my voice cutting through the warmth like a blade. "I'm here for an asset inspection." My mother appeared at the top of the stairs, clutching her pearls. Caleb came out of the kitchen. "You can't just barge in here," my father sputtered, finding his voice. "This is my house. I'll call the police." "Please do," I said calmly. "I'm sure they'd be interested to see the deed." I reached into my bag and pulled out a thick folder. I dropped it on the hallway table. The thud echoed in the silence. As of 9 a.m. "This morning, the mortgage note on this property was assigned to JH Holdings LLC, I said. "I bought the debt. Dad, I am the lender. And since you are 90 days in default and in violation of the commercial use covenant by running an illegal hotel, I am accelerating the loan." You bought the mortgage?" Caleb stammered. "And I know about the crypto wallet. Caleb," I added, locking eyes with him. "Caleb Alpha, I have the transaction logs. I know you've been siphoning the mortgage payments to gamble on meme coins while Dad looked the other way." The color drained from my father's face. He looked at Caleb, then back at me, terror replacing the anger. He realized the game wasn't just up. The board had been flipped. "You have 60 minutes to vacate the premises," I said, checking my watch. "If you are not out, my associates will escort you out for trespassing on commercial property." "Jordan, please," my mother wailed, finally descending the stairs, tears streaming down her face. "We're family. You can't put us on the street in winter. This is our home." I looked at her. I searched for pity, for guilt, for anything. But all I felt was the cool detachment of a soldier clearing a room. "It stopped being a home when you turned it into a business," I said. "You wanted to monetize my sacrifice? Fine. This is the bill coming due." I turned my back on them and walked into the living room. I took my Purple Heart off the wall, sliding it into my bag. Behind me, the chaos erupted sobs, shouting, the frantic zipping of suitcases. I didn't watch. I stood by the window and watched the snow fall. An hour later, they were gone. The house was silent, empty. It felt hollow, like a stage set after the actors had quit. Moving in was never the plan. Neither was toasting to victory by the fire. I walked out the front door and locked it for the last time. Waiting in the driveway was a man in a gray suit, a developer I had contacted 3 days ago. He specialized in teardowns. You have the title? He asked, rubbing his gloved hands together. Clean and clear, I said, handing him the keys. It's a shame, he said, looking up at the sprawling timber frame. Good bones. We'll have it leveled in a week, though. The land value is incredible. Do it, I said. He handed me a cashier's check. $350,000. The equity I had salvaged from the wreckage of my family's greed. I got back into my SUV and placed the check on the passenger seat. I didn't look back as I drove away. I didn't lose a family that day. I liquidated a bad investment, and as the lake house disappeared in the rearview mirror, I finally understood what it meant to be home. It wasn't a place. It was peace. If you've ever had to burn a bridge to save yourself, share this story, and make sure you're following for more stories on reclaiming your power.